Welcome. I'm Ron Baker, Director of the Canadian Small Church Ministry Centre, sponsored by Small Church Connections. And this is us, Canadian Small Churches in Action podcast. Today we have another guest with us who is going to talk a little bit about refugees and her own experience in dealing with refugees and bringing refugees to Canada and working on that whole area. And so I'm going to just let her introduce herself and just maybe some of your own background, your ministry background, the type of things that you've done over the years. And that may even just lead us into talking a little bit about the work that you've done with refugees over the years. So this is her, Susan. Yes. Yeah, you're up.
Hi, yes, I'm Susan Saunders, and I live in a very rural area of Nova Scotia, middle of the Annapolis Valley, and our nearest town, Bridgetown, has about 500 people. I grew up here on a small farm, and so the little church up the road was the heart of the community, and anybody who went to church, mostly, went to our little Baptist church. And a few people moved in and they were Church of England or Anglican now, so they went to town. But most of us went to Sunday school and then taught Sunday school and then went to church at this little church. And the little church is in my rural community, and it was built as a school originally, but in 1897 it became solely an outreach church for Paradise Baptist Church. So the Paradise United Baptist Church was on the main road, but in those days it wasn't that easy for people to travel. So they thought, well, it would be easier for the residents here to come to the little church. And right now that's the only property that Paradise United Baptist Church owns, because since did all the refugee work and everything, we had to sell our big building and the parsonage, but we still have this little West Paradise Church, and it still belongs to the Paradise United Baptist Church. So I went off to college and university and moved to Manitoba and taught school there. There was a church there that I went to, but I wasn't very church going in those days, just think it was important. So like a lot of people strayed.
Yeah.
When I came back here and settled and had a job and a nice husband, I became interested in the church again.
Oh, okay.
And so I've had all kinds of different, I don't know what you'd call them, posts. Presently I'm a deacon. I've been a deacon a couple of times. It's not something everybody do, I guess. And I've been a treasurer and I've been on lots of committees, and I went on a little mission trip to Happy Valley Goose Bay a few years ago, and that was really interesting. I did a little write-up for Tidings, a little photojournalism for Tidings magazine for our ABW. But and then I think my biggest mission work was with the refugees, with the refugee families. The whole community seemed to be excited when we were first talking about bringing in refugees from mostly Syria.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was because it was new, but everybody wanted to help, by providing funds, providing goods. I wasn't involved with the first family that we brought. The first family that came to Bridgetown was from Syria.
Okay.
And it mother and I believe 5 daughters, lovely daughters.
Oh, yeah.
And the Paradise Refugee Support Group started then. But I was just on the fringes of that. I wasn't directly involved. But the whole town wanted to participate in some way. So a house was provided and furnishings and everything that a family would need was provided. ESL was set up so all of the girls and the mother could have English as a second language training. So there are medical, like there's so much to
Yeah.
do.
Well, I guess I was going to ask some of those questions of those very
Okay.
nuts and bolts type of things that come with bringing a refugee to Canada.
Mm,
First off, you said you weren't on the first original
mhm.
group. I did talk with Mark Reese recently, and he talked a little bit about that group coming to town. And so when you look at it, what would you consider to be the first thing that needed to be done? And I'll let you decide what you want to answer to that, and then I'll start asking some other questions. We'll see.
Mm. The first thing is really done on faith because you're looking at different applicants. I'll call them applicants. They're not
Right.
really applicants, but CBAC would send us Jennifer Dara
Mhm.
in would send us different families, and we would decide if one was a good fit. First, we had to tell them that yes, we would take a family,
Oh, I guess,
so,
yeah. Mhm.
not knowing anything, and then we would choose one, and all we knew about the family really was their point of origin. We weren't told personal information really, but we were told if their safety was involved and they had to get out quickly.
Ah,
And we were told that you don't know when they're coming. They might be coming next week and they might be coming 6 months from now. So you really had to have, because it was the responsibility of the group, the refugee support group, to provide them with housing and support them financially for 6 months of the year, and the
mhm.
government the other 6 in the program we were involved in. So whether they were coming, whether you knew when they were coming or not, you had to have a residence set up for them.
Oh,
So
okay.
if it was a family of 5 or a family of 4, you could look for an apartment or a house that would be suitable for that many people. And of course, we're North Americans, so we would think of North American spaces. So if it was a family of 4, we would think, oh, at least 3 bedrooms,
Yeah, yeah.
and not realizing that some of the people that came to us lived in one room, and
Mhm.
covered this with one of the families. There were rooms, separate bedrooms for them all, but we discovered that they often like to sleep in the same close space because that's
Yeah.
what they were doing. And other groups that brought in families found that as well. So getting housing, and as I say, we really started with no money.
Mhm.
So you start fundraising right away. So we had to book venues and have people help to, we had committees who would help set up concerts.
Yeah.
We yard sales, and you know how frustrating they are dragging all this stuff and
Yes.
set tables and beating the black flies and, walking around the people and, you know, packing it all away. And
Mhm.
anyway, we did that a couple of times and made some money. Um, so there's fundraising and there's housing, and you might be paying rent on this apartment or house for
Yeah.
weeks, but you
Mhm.
had to have it ready. You couldn't bring them in unless you had it.
Right.
I guess the also once you found out, usually within a couple days notice, maybe a little longer, that they were actually flying in on a certain time,
Mhm.
uh, you had to meet them at the airport. We would drive in. We usually took more than one vehicle or a van, and we would make a welcome sign and we'd meet them at the airport. We have videos and pictures of that.
Oh,
And
great. Yeah.
uh, usually there would be, not always, but I found with us, there was usually one person in a family that could speak English.
Mhm.
They would translate. A few things were lost in translation, but hand gestures can do wonderful things. There was a
Yep.
lot of that and charades, but they were very trusting. And I thought how very frightening it must be to come down those steps at the airport. We have a little airport in Halifax. To come
Yeah.
down those steps and see these people with signs, and they're smiling at them and waving, and we have flowers for them. and hugging them, and they're just terrified
Yeah, I
because
guess.
they, as much as we had to have faith that we would get someone that we could help and that they would come, they had to have more faith than we did that they were going to be safe. Because how did they know really where they were going? The
Yeah.
governments, all these countries were doing all these things, and how did they know where they were going to end up? But anyway, we would go out for lunch and then we would take them to their home. But before they got to their home, there were a group of people who put all the provisions in the house for them, like foods,
Yeah.
just foods that we thought they would like. If they were from Ethiopia, we would try to have the grains and the coffee they liked, or
Mhm.
we thought they would like. We didn't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And the same for the families from Syria, and we had a girl from Lebanon. So we had to try to suit their living, their
Mhm.
pantries, things that we thought they like. They soon found out where to get the things they wanted,
Right. Yeah.
because other people already here, and they'd already found out where to buy the right coffee and the right grains and the right everything.
Mhm.
And but that had to be there because you couldn't bring them and leave them at a house that didn't have any provisions. They didn't even know where the grocery stores were when they first got here. So the next 2 weeks were really full on, like
Mhm.
exhausting. I'm sure for them too, but for the workers, because in our group you only have a certain amount of people, and I was retired. Some of us were retired, and so we were able to be on call, but some were working and couldn't. And other not a problem, the other situation was that some in our group were males, and all of the people we brought in were females.
Mm.
So it was only appropriate that the females would take people. You could have a male with you, but you
Yeah.
had to have a female. So the very next day after they arrived, we had to drive to Kentville, which is only 40 minutes. So we drive to Kentville. There's a federal government office there, immigration office, and that was the
Mhm.
first stop to apply for the permanent residency
Oh,
card and
okay.
do government stuff. A lot of paperwork, but it could usually all be done in the day. And they weren't the first in the province, so the people there were really kind, very, very kind, and made it painless. And so that was the very next day. And then we had to find a dentist, and we were lucky enough in our town that the dentist offered to be the dentist for all of our families.
Oh, oh, great. Yeah.
And we had to find a doctor. And this was just long enough ago that there actually were still doctors who were taking patients, not like the
Uh,
90,000
yeah.
waiting in Nova Scotia, but we could actually get a doctor. And there was a doctor in a clinic in Middleton who said, "Yes, I will look after your refugee families." And some of them had special health concerns. This was usually noted on their papers that we got before they came if they had
Mhm.
special concerns. And so we would already have been looking up specialists and places where we could um, get them some help that they
Yeah.
needed. Doctors were excellent at getting them specialists and so on. But there were many appointments going back and forth to specialists to get, a family of five, which is the first one that I was involved in, from
Yeah.
ages 2 grandmother.
Oh,
Um, that was a lot of appointments, getting all of
yeah.
them their second medical appointments, and some of them needed specialist appointments. And plus, we had another person who took them to all the dental appointments because their teeth required a lot of work,
Mhm.
and that's another expense, some thousands of dollars that we paid from our group's funds for their dental work to bring it up to a standard that would be where we would have
Right.
our teeth at the same point in time.
Mhm.
So
So,
that
so
was
with some of these finances, was there government aid? Were there other? Uh, uh, how did that work? I mean, the group itself has fundraised and used their funds, as you say,
Mhm.
towards dentistry and that type of thing. What kind of sharing or other financial approaches were used?
I don't actually remember. I think that all of the dentistry was paid for by us.
Hmm.
Um, it wasn't until the government um, began paying their share, their half of the year,
Oh,
that
okay.
that would have relieved some of the stress of their living expenses. But
Yeah.
dentistry and all of that, that was on us entirely. There
Mhm.
were other churches who were doing fundraisers for us as well,
Oh,
churches
okay.
that did have a family. So they were doing fundraising, and we always seemed to have what we needed. Um, when we finished, I think we did 5 families, 4 or 5 different groups. And when we stopped, mostly because we were just exhausted,
Yeah.
to be honest, um, we still had $750 left
Oh,
in
wow.
that account. And so we just turned it back to Jennifer Dara,
Mhm.
to help wherever it was needed. But I can just remember days of just, oh, everybody got Google Translate on their phones and
Oh,
iPads.
I'll bet you.
And that was a big help. And we would have a welcome potluck. I don't know if you do
Mhm.
potluck. You are, but
Oh, very definitely.
okay.
Very
So we
definitely.
meals at somebody's house or at the church and invite the community or whoever wanted to come, and they would be introduced to everybody, and it was all warm and welcoming. But I'm sure, very shocking,
Mhm.
strange. It was helpful when they could speak English, but English wasn't always it was didn't always help. There was still a lot lost in translation.
Yeah.
And we had one person who insisted that we take her to the airport. She needed to go to Toronto. She felt that we were keeping her against her will, and there was
Oh.
a translator, and we tried to explain to her that we were helping her to get settled before she went to the big city and to get her refugee status and various things. So your help is not always accepted the way that you think it's going to.
Yeah.
And you another thing we learned is that our customs are not the same everywhere.
I'll bet you.
We're just so North American that we think that everybody thinks the same way. There was a family who came, not one of ours, but they had come from somewhere in Africa, probably Ethiopia, because we had a few from there. And they were used to cooking outside, so they had all the appliances in their lovely apartment, but they were
Yeah.
still outside in the driveway. So they had to kind of, teach them how to do things like that.
Mhm.
Um, the language, that was my job also, was setting up ESL
Oh, okay.
training to them and having volunteers. There is an excellent group, and I can't even remember the name of it now. It doesn't matter. In Kentville, it's the learning center that specializes in that, and
Mhm.
they would provide teachers, and we would find a place that would allow us and the student to go there free, and we would take them, um, because all the people we had were in a town. They could walk to these various places, but one of the facilities was a church in Annapolis Royal, which is half
Mhm.
an hour. So we got the transit bus gave every refugee that we had a free month, 3 months pass,
Oh, wow.
and they could use that. So we showed them how to use the bus. Once they went once, they were fine, because
Mhm.
most of them traveling in very busy, noisy cities.
Yeah.
So coming to a quiet little rural area and sitting on a quiet bus. And the first bus that they took, um, it was kind of funny because they looked around, and it was a brand new bus, I have
Mhm.
to say. Like, I was quite amazed. Yeah, it was a brand new bus, and it was air conditioned, and it had Wi-Fi, and they were so happy because
Oh.
they all seemed to have fun, know how to use them. And they just said, "Wow, this bus is so beautiful." And there were like 4 people on it, and they were
Mhm.
half of them. So, taught them how to use the bus to go there. Another family, um, one of the older ladies, she was old enough, I'm still young enough to be my daughter, but
Mhm.
in her 20s, and her English was, um, to the it was good enough that she could take an ESL course through
Oh, okay.
this training center in Kentville. And the local college in Middleton, the NSCC, provided a room for them to have their classroom. So she had other refugees there. There were some from Asia and some from Africa, and she from Syria. And it was really, really interesting, the different accents, but they were all. And so I taught her how to go on the bus. I would go with her the first time and come up and wait for her to go home on the bus. And
Mhm.
then she decided she wanted to have a job. So there is a People Works, it's called, in Middleton. It's a government funded place, and they help people to write resumes and so
Oh,
on. So, and find jobs. They have job boards. So I took her, and my cousin took her sister, and we each had a consultant that worked just with them one on one and wrote a resume. There was not much to put on the
yeah.
resume, but made it look as good as she could.
Mhm.
And then had a, they had free clothes there that they could choose, like for work clothes and so on. But anyway, we didn't get any of the clothes at that point. But on the way home, the first day after being at People Works, I said, "Well, I heard about some jobs. There's a huge indoor nursery that grows tomatoes and cucumbers, and it's
Mhm.
run by a called Denhan." And they were on our way home, and I said, "Well, let's just go in and practice your skills, and say that you're looking for a job, and you could leave a resume. Even we don't know what's going on." Said, "I know the people here." So we went in, and the owner came by and met us, and she said, "Well, I do have openings if you'd like
Ah.
to." Took us for a tour, and she said, "If you'd like to have a job, you're welcome to start." And we said, "When?" And she said, "Tomorrow." Said, "Can my sister come too?" And so we went back and we told her sister, "Yes, you can have a job too." So we went back to People Works and we told them we had a job for the girls. And so they picked out work clothes because they had nice clothes. They all had
Yeah.
lovely clothes. So they needed like sweatshirts and
Oh,
work clothes,
yeah. Yeah.
plaid, because they were doing lifting and pruning and picking, and so they got their work clothes. And so we took them. We drove them back and forth. I drove them the first couple days. And then there was a lady who worked there from town, from Bridgetown, where they lived. And she said, "I will bring the girls to work and bring them home."
Oh, that
So
makes
that
sense. Yeah.
for the whole season, that they worked there the whole season from early spring until the cleanup was done and the summer. And that was just too easy, but that's how that worked out. And they were making, what they thought was really good money. It was
Mhm.
like, it was, I think, $16 an hour they were getting, and they were working, 40 hours a week,
Yeah.
and they didn't mind a bit. So, yeah, that really, really helped them in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And I can't remember exactly how long they stayed, but about a year. Yeah, just
Yeah.
before their government funding was over, or our funding. I'm not sure which one went first. And they decided, they had met people um, in the cities in Ontario, and they
Yeah.
wanted to go there, more comfortable, more with people like themselves that could talk and mingle and socialize. And we were sad to lose them, but like all of our people moved to cities afterward. But we
Oh, they
felt
did.
that
Okay.
our best to give them a good start. And our job, as Gordon Hay had said, um, our job was to get them here, to get them
Mhm.
to safety, to get them to Canada, and to help them get established and acclimatized to our really strange way of life. Get them the cards they needed, and that sort of thing. And that's what we did. We had Gordon who did all the paperwork. He did all of that
Mhm.
paperwork stuff, and we were like the boots on the ground. And it worked out well because he couldn't take them to a medical appointment, for example.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, you just wouldn't send a man with all these women or one woman. Yeah. So
Mhm. So with this now, I've got a number of questions, and I'll go back to the start when you said when you were beginning, uh, the denomination, did they play a large part in sort of getting you started and getting the wheels rolling as you prepared for having a refugee come, or was this a cooperative group, or how did that work?
Do you mean outside of our church?
I'm just thinking, as you looked at having a refugee come, did the
Um,
denomination actually assist a lot at the beginning? Was that part of it, or?
yeah, because we were associated with CBAC,
Mhm.
with Canadian Baptist Atlantic um, group, and so it was through them that we knew of the opportunities.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it was our church, the Baptist church, that uh, worked within our own group.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
we were just a support group within our own church, really.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
And
with CBAC, I don't think we would have known of the opportunities. But then later, after we brought in a family, then Gordon and Mark, as you know,
mhm.
went around other churches who asked them to come and speak about how they got refugee families here. So they were in one end of Nova Scotia to the other, and a lot of other churches did bring in families after they heard our story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And with that in mind, just thinking about the assistance, or I guess the start, the group itself that became the refugee committee. How was that formed? Did somebody go around and just say, "Hey, you're it," or?
Yeah, we had a church meeting,
Mhm.
and they said we have this committee, or we want to have this committee. And I think the church had to vote on it,
Oh,
that
okay.
we would have this committee just to make
Right.
it um, acceptable, I guess, to the church, because it was affiliated with the church. So it was brought up at a church meeting and voted on that. Yes, we would start this committee, and these are the people who would be on the first one,
Mhm.
and people could volunteer, and that's how it started at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Yeah. Okay. So when I hate to say it, but I'm looking at the clock because sometimes I do that, and our time's just about up. Let
Yeah, I
me.
have no problem talking. I wish I could just tell you more,
Oh,
but
I this has been great. I've just been enjoying the stories, and that's
mm,
part of what makes it easy for us, for people listening to the podcast. We're going to sit back and say, "Hey, this is possible." I hear the story. It's really something that could be done.
do
Yeah.
I have time to tell you just one more
Oh,
thing?
for sure.
We had one family, and they were from Ethiopia, and it was four women, from the 2-year-old to the grandmother, and two daughters and another granddaughter. And they ordered traditional dresses from a dressmaker they knew,
Oh.
and they were white, and they had beautiful gold braiding down the
Mhm.
front and on them. And of course, these women were beautiful, and they put on these long dresses. And we had them at the fundraising concert. We had them come in last to walk in the aisle. The concert was in a refurbished church, no longer a church, but still looking like a church.
Yeah.
And they went up on the stage, and they sang 4 or 5 worship songs and danced them in their
Oh.
own language. And then the last one they did in English, they had practiced,
Mhm.
and everybody went crazy. They were beautiful. So then we took them to 2 or 3 other churches in the area, just small little churches. And as I sat there, every time I watched them, I thought, I wish everybody could just see this.
Mhm.
Like, it's joyous, and I still tear up when I think about it. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. One last question. If you could sum up in a few sentences, why would you want to be, why would we want you? Okay, I'll put this in personally. Why did you want to work with refugee resettlement here in Canada? What was your reason that you had for doing that?
Once you get out of your head the enormity of the problem, like the millions that are
Millions,
placed,
yes.
and you tell yourself, I I can't do anything for them.
Mhm.
And you say to yourself, but I can help one,
Yeah.
or maybe a family, and I am called to do that. I need to do something, and this is what we can do. Our CVAC is saying you can help in this way. Like, we couldn't not do it. And we just said, we can't help everyone, but we can help these, and these are the ones that we're supposed to be helping. And we just felt so strongly about it that we couldn't say no. We couldn't turn our head.
I'll be carrying these stories with me throughout this week and thinking about them. So thank you very much